age of myth had its heroes, yet none were quite like Erik. In the heart of a mist-shrouded fjord, where the cold sea lapped against ancient stones, he stood not as a king or a conqueror in the traditional sense, but as a master of a different kind of power. He was a Viking, yes, but his axe was one of 6 strings, his shield a wall of sound. Around him on the jagged cliff edge, defeated warriors lay strewn, not felled by sharpened steel, but seemingly thrown back by an invisible, thunderous force that had shattered their will and their weapons. Erik stood alone, the silhouette of a legend, holding his ancient yet strangely modern electric guitar against the dim light of the Viking age. With a defiant roar that mixed with the salty air, Erik raised his instrument, his fingers finding their place on the fretboard. He struck a single devastating power chord. The sound that erupted was not of this world, a deep, distorted growl that tore through the quiet fjord. The very air warped and rippled, the trees shuddered, and the water below churned as if a great beast had awoken. Before him, the power chord manifested as a chaotic vortex of shimmering, unstable energy, a swirling portal of purple and gold light that pulsed with the rhythm of the ringing note. The vortex enveloped him, pulling him from his timeline with the force of a maelstrom, his heroic stance lost to the temporal chaos. The transition was jarring, a violent wrench from the familiar scent of pine and sea to the acrid smell of ozone and rain. Erik found himself standing in the year 2349, a future he could never have imagined. He was in the heart of a sprawling cyberpunk metropolis, drenched in the neon glow of holographic advertisements that flickered across perpetually rain-slicked streets. Towering skyscrapers pierced the clouds, and silent flying vehicles sliced through the night sky like metallic birds of prey. His bewildered gaze, accustomed to longships and mead halls, met the glowing optical senses of a female cyborg across the street. She watched him, a relic of a forgotten past, her expression a mix of curiosity and system-level analysis. Erik, utterly lost, could only clutch his guitar, the anachronistic wooden body a stark contrast to the chrome and plastic world around him. But this new reality was fleeting. Before he could even begin to process the neon-drenched cityscape or the woman with wires for hair, the familiar chaotic energy began to swirl around him once more. The vortex, a tempest of pure time, had found him again. It ripped him from the future with the same violent indifference it had shown in his own era. The world dissolved into a blur of color and light, and he was spat out into another time. He landed hard on soft, damp earth, the air thick with humidity and the smell of primeval decay. Towering ferns and colossal, unfamiliar trees formed a dense, primordial jungle that blocked out the sun. A deafening roar shook the ground, and from behind the ancient foliage, a monstrous Tyrannosaurus Rex emerged. Its massive head, filled with teeth like daggers, lowered towards him. But fear was not in Erik's nature. With a warrior's spirit, he met the beast's roar with his own brand of thunder. His fingers danced across the fretboard, unleashing a blistering high-gain guitar solo. The sonic assault, a torrent of screaming notes and feedback, slammed into the T-Rex, causing the great dinosaur to recoil in pain and confusion. Even as the prehistoric predator stumbled back, the sky above Erik began to tear open again. The swirling temporal vortex, his constant chaotic companion, descended upon the jungle clearing. It began to pull him back into its swirling maw, a cosmic whirlpool dragging him from one timeline to another. As he was lifted from the ground, his face was a mask of primal fury and utter bewilderment. He was a warrior adrift in the ocean of history, his only anchor the magical guitar in his hands. Hurtling through the vortex, propelled toward an unknown destination in the vast, uncharted expanse of time, his journey was far from over. The churning, chaotic tunnel of the time vortex spat him out with violent force. Erik, the Viking warrior, slammed onto a rain-slicked landing platform, the impact rattling his bones. Cold, metallic rain fell in sheets, blurring the neon signs that climbed the impossibly tall skyscraper he now found himself on. Below him, the cyberpunk city pulsed with a life he couldn't comprehend, a sprawling metropolis of chrome and light. A far cry from the green fjords of his home, the air smelled of ozone and wet pavement, a stark contrast to the salt and pine of his own time. He pushed himself to his knees, his head swimming, the aftershocks of temporal travel still ringing in his ears. Before Erik could even begin to process his new, bewildering surroundings, a low hum filled the air, growing into a menacing whir. From the deep shadows clinging to the edges of the platform, advanced security drones emerged, their red optical sensors locking onto him. They moved with an unnerving, silent grace, flanking him in a calculated predatory circle. Leading them was a figure that was both woman and machine, the cyborg, Syra. Her movements were fluid, her gaze cold and analytical. Erik let out a defiant roar and surged to his feet, but his raw primal strength was useless. The drones fired beams of crackling energy that ensnared his limbs, and Syra closed the distance in a blur, a sharp, stinging sensation piercing his neck. The neon world dissolved into darkness as he was subdued and sedated. Consciousness returned slowly, a dull throb behind his eyes. Erik found himself in a sterile white laboratory, stripped of his weapons and armor. The room was unnaturally bright, every surface gleaming under cold, embedded lights. Across the chamber, his battle-worn guitar, the very instrument of his chaotic journey, was suspended in a shimmering, crackling energy field. The wood seemed to strain against its prison, humming with latent power. A figure in a sleek, tailored suit entered the room, his smile as polished and cold as the chrome that dominated this age. "Welcome, traveler," he said, his voice smooth. "I am Kalen Vance, CEO of Omnicorp. We've been tracking the energy signatures from your little jumps through history. That guitar of yours, it's the key. With it, we will not just observe time, we will command it." From a darkened control room overlooking the lab, Syra watched the interrogation. Vance's words were laced with a chilling ambition, his eyes gleaming with a lust for power that she recognized all too well. He saw Erik not as a man, but as a resource to be exploited, a key to a lock he was desperate to open. A flicker of unease, a ghost of a feeling she thought had been programmed out of her, began to surface. On the private comm line, shielded from Vance's surveillance, she accessed archival data streams. Glimpses of Erik's world flooded her vision. Vast, untamed forests, raging seas, and a fierce, vibrant culture. It was a world of raw freedom, a stark contrast to the rigid control of her own. In that moment, Syra made a choice. With a few keystrokes, she triggered a Level 1 security alert in a distant sector of the tower, a carefully crafted diversion. As alarms blared and red lights strobed through the facility, chaos erupted outside the lab. Vance's attention was instantly diverted, his face twisting in annoyance. Seizing the opportunity, Syra strode into the laboratory, her expression unreadable. With a flick of her wrist at a control panel, the crackling energy field holding the guitar dissipated. The instrument fell, and she caught it with practiced ease. She tossed it across the room to Erik, her voice cutting through the noise of the alarms. "He wants a storm? Give him one." Erik caught the guitar, his fingers finding the familiar worn frets. A furious, triumphant grin spread across his face as he planted his feet. He struck a single, deafening power chord. The sound wave, raw and untamed, ripped through the laboratory. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks, glass shattered, and the very air began to shimmer and tear as the time vortex, wild and uncontrolled, began to open right inside the building. The temporal vortex collapses with a deafening implosion, not onto solid ground, but onto the slick, corroded rooftop of a skyscraper, half swallowed by the sea. Erik, a towering figure who looked as though he'd been plucked from a Viking saga with his powerful build and long, Braided Beard stumbles, catching his companion, Syra. They are surrounded by the skeletal remains of a metropolis, a city drowned by angry rising tides under a perpetually sickly yellow sky. The air is thick with salt and decay. Their sudden appearance does not go unnoticed. From the shadows of twisted metal and algae-covered concrete, figures emerge. Scavengers, their faces hardened by a brutal existence, armed with jagged makeshift weapons crafted from the city's bones. They move with a predatory confidence, cornering the newcomers. At their head is a man adorned in rusted armor and a crown of corroded gears, the Rusted Prince. Syra, whose advanced systems are a marvel of another time, sputters and glitches. The salt water has infiltrated her core programming, rendering her vulnerable. Outnumbered and with their primary defense compromised, they have no choice but to surrender. The scavenger's eyes fixate on Erik's most prized possession, his guitar. With a sneer, the prince snatches it away. Forced to comply, Erik and Syra are led through the treacherous ruins, down into the heart of the scavenger's domain. Their throne room is a repurposed bank vault, its massive steel door permanently ajar, a testament to a bygone era of wealth. Inside, the guitar is not treated as loot, but as an object of reverence. The Rusted Prince carefully places it upon a strange, altar-like machine, humming with latent energy. He turns to his captives, a fanatical gleam in his eyes. We call it the power relic, he explains, his voice a gravelly rasp. He believes Erik's instrument is not a mere guitar, but a key. The one thing capable of reawakening the city is dormant power grid and breathing life back into the corpse of their world. Before Erik can process this bizarre prophecy, a shadow falls over the vault's entrance. A sleek, obsidian vessel, bearing the unmistakable insignia of Omnicorp, descends silently from the jaundiced clouds, its engines making no sound as it lands on a nearby tower. A ramp lowers and a figure emerges, flanked by a pair of silent, menacing security drones. It's Kalen Vance, his face an impassive mask of corporate authority. A shimmering hologram of his head flickers to life, broadcasting his voice across the ruins. Return my property, and I will spare your pathetic lives. The threat hangs in the damp air, cold and absolute. The Rusted Prince, however, merely laughs, a harsh, grating sound that echoes off the vault walls. He gestures to his scavengers, who raise their crude weapons with a defiant roar, ready to defend their rusted kingdom. The prince then turns his attention back to Erik, his expression deadly serious. He points a finger, not at Vance, but at Erik himself. "Make the relic sing, Northman," he commands, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper, "or we all die." Erik's gaze darts from the strange machine holding his guitar to the approaching silhouettes of Vance's drones, and finally to Syra, who is desperately trying to reboot her fried systems, her optical sensors flickering in the gloom. The final chord of destiny hung in the air, a choice poised between the metallic claws of Omnicorp and the desperate grasp of the scavengers. Erik, a warrior displaced in time, stood before the power relic, his ancient resolve clashing with the sterile hum of the future. He saw no other path. With a defiant roar that echoed the sagas of his people, he jammed the guitar's jack into the relic's port. He struck a single thunderous chord, a Viking's battle cry translated into sound. But it wasn't a wave of destructive electricity that answered him. Instead, the machine pulsed, unleashing a silent, shimmering wave of pure temporal energy, a force that bent the very fabric of the moment. The climax was not one of fire and steel, but of temporal reckoning. The energy wave rippled through the vault, a silent tsunami against the tide of technology. Omnicorp's advanced drones, sleek and deadly moments before, sputtered and fell from the air like metallic birds with broken wings. The scavengers' crude cybernetics, their only advantage in this harsh world, sparked and went dark, the lights in their augmented eyes dying out. The Rusted Prince, a titan of scavenged tech, collapsed as his augments overloaded, leaving him a man trapped in a prison of his own making. Aboard his orbiting vessel, Kalen Vance could only watch on his monitors, his face a mask of incandescent fury as every piece of his meticulously crafted technology failed before this ancient, impossible power. As the chaos subsided, the power relic revealed its true nature. It was no weapon, but a temporal anchor, a bridge across the chasm of centuries. A shimmering, ethereal portal bloomed in the center of the vault, its surface swirling with images not of this concrete and chrome world. Through the vortex, Erik saw it, a sight that tore at his soul. The familiar, sturdy lines of his village's longhouse stood proudly under a clear, star-dusted sky, the snow-covered ground glistening in the moonlight. It was home. Beside him, Cyrus' systems rebooted, her optical sensors blinking back to life. Her voice, now clear of any static, was soft. "Go, Erik, you belong there." A final, silent farewell passed between them. In the gaze of the chrome and wire woman, Erik saw not a machine, but a warrior. A flicker of understanding, of shared battles and mutual respect. He carefully disconnected the guitar, the instrument that had been his only companion and weapon in this strange new age. He pressed it into her hands, a relic of his world, now entrusted to hers. Without a word, he turned his back on the future he had unwillingly inherited and walked towards the shimmering promise of his past. He did not look back. Erik stepped through the shimmering veil, the cold, sterile air of the vault replaced by the crisp, biting wind of his homeland. The final shot is of him, a figure from a forgotten age, standing in the deep snow outside the warm glow of the longhouse. The cacophony of the cyberpunk future, the sirens, the drones, the endless hum of technology faded into a distant memory, replaced by the gentle sigh of the northern wind. He was home. Behind him, the portal snapped shut, its light extinguished in an instant. In the now silent vault, Cyrus stood alone, holding the guitar. It was a strange and beautiful artifact, a relic born of two worlds, and a testament to the Viking who had played the final chord.